Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Shay and Douglas here from Earth Heroes TV, 17th of February, Thursday morning here in Australia, and I'm joined with Jason Reynolds from the Quantum Movement. Today we're going to open up the conversation around liberation and really ask this deep question, or is it even possible to be fully liberated on a personal level, collective level, and even in an entrepreneurial sense moving forward? And if so, what does it actually take to be able to go down that process and that pathway and go on the journey to seeking full revelation in how to be liberated? So it's a really exciting conversation. I want to invite you to stay with us through to the end. And Jason and I have opened up this discussion in the last year where you can go and access all the previous on TV, go and find some great videos and insights where Jason really unpacks these pieces on how we can really understand what's going on in our lives so that we can better navigate our relationships and our well-being and, all elements of our lives essentially. So it's a really exciting kind of opportunity to open this discussion up with Jason again, liberation essentially. So Jason, thanks for taking the time out this morning to join me.
I think there we go, the mic, that works better. Thank you for having me. Thanks. Looking forward to going to this. I think it's probably something that sits at the root of what a lot of people's experiences at the moment in fighting against and opposing and having some sort of adversity towards what they don't like in the world. But I think the deeper part of this is what sits underneath it is, where is it that I'm not creating my own life? Where is it that causes me to be distracted enough to lobby or to seek freedom through the hands of others? And ultimately, it's only going to be ourselves that engages in life to such an extent which, no matter what's happening in the world, that we become so inspired within our own self that when we start to become present to all of what we are, we're actually moving and working with all of these other aspects or fringe elements of our own life, because we start to connect with the reason why we're here.
Yeah, it's a big one to unpack, and I'm stoked that we're going into it today. Before we jump into the conversation, I just want to thank those who are tuning in early on this Thursday morning on the socials. Just if you're watching live right now, let us know where you're tuning in from. And it's our intention with these conversations to really unpack these deeper notions of life, ultimately to serve you, to help you, to give you another perspective, another lens, to enable you to realize your true nature, to realize your essence as in your core as a human being. And that's part of the reasons why we want to do this. If you have any questions, please just write them in the comment section right now, and we can unpack those questions for you to keep it relevant for what you're doing in your life, because we're here to serve. We love doing this conversation. We love opening up these discussions because we love looking out, the different perspectives of the world, when it's so easy to get stuck in our own stories, get stuck in our own limitations, structural belief systems that potentially may not be actually serving us. And so that's why we're really looking at these different areas of life, conversations, and we want to invite you to be a part of that with us. So just come along the journey, guys. Let us know where you're tuning in from, and if you have any questions, we can ask and we can discuss at a level to really unpack what it means to be liberated. So Jason, you mentioned at the beginning, liberation is kind of part of our innate human kind of intelligence and part of our journey. But why is it that so many of us get caught up in, and bound up in a constricted ball or, suit of life that holds us back, and there's like such a deep fear to fully let go and open and express?
Yeah. I suppose a lot of life can be brought back to a simplicity, but the question is, do we give ourselves the space to actually observe that simplicity, or are we finding ourselves conditioned to react to what's going on? Because at the basis of what we are is we're here to express ourselves. And expressing ourselves is not just through our words, it's through what we create, it's through the way we create it, it's through the way we carry ourselves, from the way that we dress, the people that we hang out with, all of those things are our own form of our own expression. And our ability to express ourselves is going to be very much reliant and determined by the environment that we have created. And the question is, for some of us, is where I'm living, what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, what I'm doing it for. Have I actually considered that at any particular time, or has it been a progression from one reaction to the next, and I've now just found myself in this position? And a question that, and I believe in life and what's going on a bit in the world is one of the things that's forgotten and one of the things that's overlooked, because there seems to be more charged and triggered conversations, but it's the very liberty for people to create something for themselves, to be able to contribute to life. And for some of us, that's through business, or that's through what it is that we do day to day. So the question for many is what I'm doing an obligation? Or is what I'm doing something that is so important to me that it justifies me spending my time away from the people that I love the most? Or, to look at it from the other side, is the person I'm in a relationship with, or the relationships that I've created or assumed to have with these people, am I doing what I'm doing to escape that because I'm not satisfied or fulfilled in that space? So when we start to look to liberate ourselves, one of the things to become aware of is what's going to happen in our life is we're going to experience, at the starting point of every part of our journey, is chaos. It is, what are we going to do? How are we going to get there? What does it look like? And then as we start to move forward, we start to confront things different to what we've thought they may be, because from a place of observation, before we start moving into it, we're assuming what we're going to receive or what we're going to experience on the other side. And that has become something that is very crippling in most people's lives, because they create this idea, let's just say with starting their own project or enterprise, is what they find is very different to what they expect. I want to have freedom. I don't want to work for someone. I want to start creating something different in my life. And a lot of what's happened in the world at the moment is taking away the very freedoms of people in such things as small business to actually start to do and operate their life their way. Because for many of us, we might find ourselves trapped in a system that's around finances. We might find ourselves trapped in a system of a relationship, because we don't yet understand, or have never even asked ourselves the question, what do we actually want in a relationship with our partner? And if we haven't considered that, we're going to continually keep fighting against their intentions or their best efforts to support or serve us. But if we don't know what we want, how can they possibly understand that? If we're not having an open and honest conversation here comes the sorry, just let that helicopter we seem to get a lot of them through here recently, but it's mainly joyrides, I think. So at what particular point, and the sad thing for most of us is that it waits until we've hit a certain breakdown in our life before we start to consider what we really want. Because what we've learned as individuals is, whether we like it or not, that most of our actions are triggered by pain. So when we have hit rock bottom, when life has become extremely challenging, or there's a crisis of some sort, that for some, the first point they come to accept themselves and actually consider what they want might be in tragedies such as a terminal illness. That suddenly the priority becomes life. And it's at that particular point that we start to consider, well, what's really important? What is it that I really want? Why is it that we don't do that in a space where everything is great, where everything is working perfectly, where everything couldn't be better? Why is it that we don't allow ourselves that particular foundation to elevate from, to allow that to be our 0 point? Because most of us, the 0 point is the thing that we're avoiding, is we don't want to be in pain again. We don't want to be broke again. We don't want to have, our heart broken. And sometimes those experiences are so important to go through, but the challenge that most of us have, and the reason why we might keep revisiting it, is we never learn from what created that in the first place. Because what I would suggest is that when you come into a place of your own love and your own acceptance, which is about receiving your own attention, for me, and then to consider and ask myself in a place of patience and nurture, what do I really want? What would I love to experience? What would I be inspired by? Not what would be good, not what I can just accept, but what is so important to me that I would find myself spending time away from my loved ones in order to do that. And if that's not what I'm doing, what is it that I am doing? If I'm not here to be brilliant, what am I actually here for? And those types of questions, that when we start to actually see ourselves as more, like, just consider that when we may have an experience of life where we're loving ourselves, and we can't fault any part of our existence in our life. Do we tend to, at that moment, continue to put ourselves first in the same way that we did when we were in dire need or in pain? Because when we're in pain, the thing that gets us out of that is when we decide to put ourselves first. If it's just about fitness, just to get to the gym before I do everything else. If it's about finances, it's about understanding and suddenly starting to learn how I can make more, how I can invest, how I can even just manage my day-to-day expenses. And we put ourselves first, and then we find ourselves at the end of that in a place of, wow, this is great. And what occurs is, because we did it from a place that was stimulated by pain to begin with, the actual motivation and the trigger that created it in the first place is now gone, because pain's not there. And then therefore we stop and we set into a state of inertia where we eventually start to put ourselves last, that as we've got everything, rather than creating from that point, what we start to do is put ourselves second, third, fourth, and fifth. I know I've got everything. I'm okay. You take that. Now I've got this. You have that. And ultimately what we start plotting is a course back to our own pain, where we can give ourselves attention again to put ourselves in the rightful place of putting ourselves first, because our life is our life. We're the only ones that can change that. We can't change other people's lives. We can only change our own. But what if we were, and this is where, when I work with people at a high level, and even at a starting point, it's the same concept, is how can you get people to a point where they experience a level of freedom, a level of success, a level of brilliance in their life, and to allow that to be the trigger point to where they then put the most amount of energy and effort into their life. Because if I can share this as I suppose a part of even aspects of quantum physics, but go beyond that, it's just the nature of our existence. It doesn't matter what words we give it. When we're in pain, it takes, let's say, 10 units of energy to get 1 unit of energy outcome. So we're putting in a lot of effort and we're getting little output. And that's what we become conditioned to. And that seems to be like that we know 2 + 2, it makes us feel comfortable because it's a certainty. When we're in pain, and a lot of us, what we've learned is to trigger and act from pain, is we've created this condition that I have to work hard to get an outcome. And for most of us, that's survival. And when we're just surviving and just managing, well, we seem to be doing what other people are doing. And then we find comfort in this collective frequency that other people are commonly in. To step out of that, to step into, which ironically, the 1% of, most, like, businesses that start, 1.8% of them actually still exist more than 10 years' time. I mean, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of businesses starting each year just in Australia. And at the end of that, there's such a fraction of those that actually exist and are maintained. There's 1% of people that, in sports, 1% of people in wealth, 1%, and the other 99% are sticking with this collective idea of having to put more energy in to have a little outcome. But the only difference in people of success is what they start to do from a place when everything is great in your life, and therefore there's no resistance, there's no force, there's nothing opposing you as you assume. It couldn't get any better. At that particular point, it only takes 1 unit of energy to get 10 units of energy as an outcome. So you put something in and you get a great return or response. Now, for some people, that sounds like, well, that's where I want to be. But what I've learned with people is when they get to that particular space, it's the inability to be able to accept the growth that comes with it, the responsibility of managing and receiving a great level of abundance in their own life. And that to me is where the most significant changes can be made, is just that particular shift, that when we realize the guilt and shame that we have in expressing and exposing our wealth, and I don't just mean financially, I mean the wealth that exists in our life in every part of our life. The wealth in our life is very much determined by the space that we can maintain for ourselves as we grow. So for example, when some people have great levels of success, the first thing they're looking to do is to give it away to others. But what we don't realize is that if we were at that particular point to honor ourselves, which have been led to believe is selfish rather than self-full and loving, at that particular point, if we take action, we show a pathway that provides space behind us that other people can follow. But when other people are continuing to find pain in order to stimulate themselves or to celebrate themselves, digging a hole and only to get out of that hole and feeling like they've made it, only to realize they dug the hole in the first place, that's not life. That's a cycle. That's a loop. But beyond that is when we find that most significant breakthrough in our life, to be able to receive that and accept it, not to covet it, not to own it, not to hold on to it as that breakthrough moment that I had that I keep referring to, but to allow that to just be the norm. And the way that we allow it to be the norm is that if we start to act from a place of our own grace, a place from act from our own significance, what we start to bring into our life, because the very nature of ourselves is to express ourselves, and we're looking for that stimulation and that permission at each time. If we make a different decision, if we start to observe and look for those moments in our life and we choose those as the trigger points to act, what we start to find is great success without work. And for anyone who has been led to believe that the harder you work, the more success you will have, it is still under the illusion of a system that requires you to be a slave to it. And to actually, why is it that the question often comes when we work with people here is, well, why is it so hard to do that? Because people have mistaken fear with pain. Fear and pain don't relate to each other, but they've been entangled into the same conversation. Pain is an experience that we have when we're at the greatest level of disconnection and disintegration with ourselves. And let's just say it at its own term, which triggers many, is the ignorance that we have to ourselves, is what brings pain. Pain is there as a response where the body is saying, you're killing me here. This is not what I'm here. The body is only here to experience joy. It's not here to provide feelings or guidance or insight. The body is only there to experience joy. It's when we start to go into this particular place beyond our pain and we get to a place of grace, a place of success, then we start to work with our pure intelligence. And whilst our pure intelligence is called in at this place is because beyond the pinnacle and the peak of our own experience, that is where fear really exists. Because that is the very nature of fear, is when we're stepping into the absolute unknown. Fear that is confused from pain is not fear. It is, I don't want to. I don't want to have to go through that again. It's boredom. It's repetitive. And we put it down to a place of, I don't want to have to show myself in the place that I've now come to in pain, in being broken. I don't want to expose that. And therefore, we don't want to go through it again. But we find ourselves at some point when the pain becomes too much that we have to. Otherwise, the other option is to find an exit point, to leave this particular existence. But the key is at the top part. At the top of this, what I would call the conditioning wave, is at the top of that point, that is pure fear. When I have to step into a place that I do not know, that no one has defined, that no one else can show me, because that journey is individual. That journey can only be done by you. That's where courage is required. And that's the only place that courage should be employed. Because at that particular point is where I create movement. Now, the interesting thing into that nothingness, into that infinite. And that is the infinite that people talk about, is where there is not defined. And to that particular point, that is fear, and it is also growth. But there's two things that we can employ at that time. And if we employ thinking, justification, possession of what we've achieved, rather than the experience of it and the understanding as to how we've got there, we will think about it. We will think, if we move forward, well, I might lose what I've got. If I move forward, what if things don't work out? What if it's not better? And ultimately, we end up just holding on to where we are. And in the end of it, we end up losing it anyway. But growth is different. It's the same intersection. It's the same space. But growth is stepping into the unknown. Growth is stepping into that particular place by taking action, making decisions. And the truth is, you'll never know what to do. And this is why I would say it is most important, and the greatest responsibility that we have is to come to a place where we learn to navigate ourselves from our soul that has wisdom beyond our logic, beyond our thinking, beyond any sort of level of the brain or any observation of it through neuroscience and any of those things. These are just responses to our intelligence. It's trying to keep up to the speed and the pure speed of absolute consciousness. So, of course, to step into that rare space. That rare space that is undefined is meeting something that is rare within you. Supposedly, as far as if we believe anything from history, there's been about 180 billion people that have existed in this planet, in this plane. And you're one of 180 billion. There is nothing more rare than you. There is nothing that will ever be like you. There's nothing that will ever define you. But if we stay in pain, we're going to be defined by others. We're going to follow other people's way, other people's methods, and we'll continue to find dissatisfaction. But when the rareness that we allow to accept in ourselves and come into an audience with our soul, and to find the courage to do that, that to me is real courage. The vulnerability to be able to push out, start to expose that raw part of us that no one else has ever seen, as we start to consider the impossible. And it's only impossible because it hasn't been done before, because we've never been here before to do that. It's not impossible because it can't be done, but there's just no evidence of it at this point. So when we get to those moments of breakthrough and brilliance, how can you start doing that? And it is to start to make decisions from that space of clarity, from that space of love, from that space of acceptance, rather than waiting to, I have to, and I should, and I must, whereas I've just lost some money. My partner is not happy. I'm not feeling spiritually fulfilled. That when we go into allowing our life to be run and driven by our feelings are responses in our body that are suggesting it is overwhelmed. It has been misdirected, because your wisdom and your discernment will only ever come from your soul. Your body here is the ability to interact with the things around you. It is only here to experience and to engage and embody joy. It is not here to discern or provide wisdom. It has an autonomic intelligence to run and operate all the things within you. Don't interrupt it. Stop buying into ideas that food is medicine, that supplements are going to help me. This is a continuation into the fact that the body is what's in control. The body's never been in control. The body is an essential, equal, supporting part of the soul. With the soul without a body, can't create anything. It has an immaculate amount of wisdom, an immaculate amount of intelligence, but it can't form anything. It's the physical capacity in a marriage between both, and we just need to understand the role of both of them. And once we do, suddenly we can stop opposing and fighting against.
That's so good, Jason. Thanks for sharing. And there's so much there a little bit further as well. Before we do, I just wanted to acknowledge we got Tanya tuning in. She says, step into the unknown and grow beyond belief. It's a beautiful perspective. We also got Kelly saying fruit and veggies only. So this is so funny. So good. Thanks for tuning in, guys. And I guess like to bring it back to kind of what you initiated the conversation with, particularly around overcoming, this idea of liberation, and that what I've come to recognize is that there are coming into awareness as a first step that they're not liberated, but there's a large quantity of people, and I certainly was in that space as well growing up, not realizing I was actually constricted by the fear and the denser emotions that I didn't even comprehend. I was, a really privileged young white man growing up about need and want, and I was going about in the normal cycles of our societal constructs that were limiting, but I didn't realize at the time that I needed to be liberated was not relevant for me, because I was already, having a great life. But yet there was still a lot of these subconscious underlying patterns that were playing out. I was doing things for other people, and I was stuck in this perpetual cycle that was keeping me bound into these cycles and these patterns and these contracts that I'm adapting myself to without even knowing. And so I guess my question in that respect is, you kind of touched on it a bit, where you mentioned that, for most people it comes to the point of pain. And for me, it was certainly, having their physical pain and a moment and season in my life that disrupted my path and made me realize that I was, because I went through a series of knee injuries and the pain was overwhelming, and it really stopped me in my tracks, and I had to sit with the pain and be present with it, and then look at, how it's shown up in the past emotionally and in other areas. And so in that process, then I was stuck in so much patterns of my past that I felt I wanted to change. And so like significant key parts to this process that you've highlighted. And the last step is like this awareness to recreate new patterns for the future, as you mentioned, unknown, stepping into creator being, stepping into, trusting in the uncertainty, and designing a life by that creator spirit that comes through. So my curiosity is, like, there's likely diverse range of people listening into this conversation now, and some people who are listening will probably find the key areas that are relevant for them. But in breaking that down, is it necessary that all of us must go through, a painful period of suffering and a dark night of the soul in order to go down the path of exploring liberation? Or, can we short a loop circuit and jump onto the path with simple awareness?
Yeah. I would say the answer is we don't have to go through pain. When we realize that, so to me, that there's two parts, and I've said this before, is that the two parts of us are just the energetic and the physical. For some, the body and the spirit, or spirit and matter, or whatever we want to look to beyond that. The space in between that, when those two things are not working in harmony, and we're not allowing them to work in harmony, when we're in a state of interruption, is we create the mind. And the mind is extremely powerful. The mind is what I would say some people have come to understand as the Akashic records. And, it's been defined in so many different ways. It is the entirety of every single experience, every single evidence, everything that's been perpetrated, everything that's been created up until this point in time. But therefore, it's in the past. The mind is powerful to access if we understand how to access it and for what purpose. But when we sit in the mind in absence to our own self, we're only going to recreate what was already there, unless we're accessing it through choice and through point of reference. Now, when we're disintegrated, let's say that the energetic and the physical, we're denying one over the other, or we're not allowing or creating an environment in our life that inspires us to be whole and to be present and to be fully exposed in that moment, where we're going to find a level of dissatisfaction. And that dissatisfaction can start to create a judgment towards ourselves, which then starts to observe and break down what we are, and we separate, and then we start to access the mind because it's comfortable, because it's something that we can refer to and relate to. Now, our own significance in the moment is when we become integrated. It's in that particular space that there's nothing to force. There's nothing we have to work on. There's no disease to overcome. There's nothing to fight against. But when we're in the mind, we have knowledge. And that knowledge, within that, there is like all things like beliefs. When we start working on things like beliefs, like when we're in a space of integration, we don't need to work on beliefs. We're not restricted by beliefs. The very fact that we're being restricted or that we're being overwhelmed in our own life by a belief and this idea that we need to clear them is only an indication that we are disconnected from our own truth. And therefore, we continue to having this fight between self-belief and beliefs. You know, one can only exist, and you can't have self-belief and belief in the same area. There's one or the other. So we either buy into our own truth or we buy into what other people have constructed prior to this moment that we choose to believe in. So when we're buying into the mind, it's familiarity, and familiarity is extremely seductive. And this is why many people in their life will go into, you know, painful situations of abuse, painful situations in workplaces, in certain areas of life, whatever it may be, because it's familiar to them, even though they know that it is destroying the very fabric of what they are. They don't know anything else, and they find comfort in the familiarity. And that's why for many of us, we find ourselves locked in the mind. Now, on the other side of that, to be integrated is to realize none of my time and my stimulation needs to be caught up in fighting disease. I don't need to be taking what I was saying before, food as medicine, because there's nothing wrong. These diseases only come, the dis-ease only comes when I'm disconnected. When I'm connected, people spend so much of their time working on so many practices, from meditations to all sorts of stuff, in order to have fleeting moments of their own integration. And then when they step out of that, they're just, well, I've got to go back into the world now. Well, there's a lot of things to do. I've got to get this list done, and I've got to make all these things happen. And you create this duality. Now, if we could have the courage to surrender into the moment, and to first do that, in the question you're asking before, is we have to go through and liberate ourselves from this conditioning that we've had on the physical body being any sort of indicator or direction in our life. The idea that we have a feeling in my knee or my neck or whatever, and that means that something's going on in my body, is one of the great, look, it can provide liberation to people, and many people have got liberation from it. But it is a constant loop. It is a dependency and a requirement upon a pain to find an awareness that, okay, I'm having this feeling, so that's giving me, I understand that now. And then we have that moment of still not stepping into the void, still not stepping into the unknown, because that particular pain has only come for me to bring attention to myself, to then maintain or get to a state of integration and presence with myself, to then start my journey. But for many of us, the journey has becoming this loop of identifying a problem or something where I'm inadequate or I'm not enough, and therefore I'm going to fix that, and then I have this moment of celebration. And if I can, and some of us, we work very hard on doing that again and again and again and again. The real irony and the trick that's being played on humanity is there's such a simple process to find integration. And to me, that's liberating the physical body from the enslavement that we've placed it under to provide for us in a very manual and physical way. So when we work from places of psychology, it's working from a broken system. It's supporting the very system that we are a part of, that we are not significant or not taught or elevated to be significant. Now, for me, one of the reasons that we could say that people as, you know, children go through pain and they go through all these transgressions in their life and trauma, and they create this thing called the ego in order to liberate it at some time in their life, if they choose, or otherwise they surrender into it. They just accept their lot. Is something that's very much missing is generational wisdom. And that might sound like, well, that's a really romantic idea. And, you know, but it was up until 100 years ago, it was alive and well. In some cultures now, I mean, I remember when I was young and growing up in Melbourne, and there was a very strong Greek culture, the very strong Vietnamese culture. But, you know, there was talk and intimation that they keep to themselves, and why don't they integrate? Why don't they just be, living here? But I look at that now, and I see them actually maintaining this particular process of family where they were passing on their own wisdom and information and creating, a space outside of dependency. Whereas for many, the conditioning was, just everyone get together as one. And this is, I suppose, the conditioning of community, that before we become independent, because communities will only ever be strong when you have independence first cultivated within them. No community will grow without independence first. And we've all seen communities and uprisings of let's get them. And then when the thing that has stimulated that community falls down, a community that's driven out of a resilience and robust space of strong individuals who have independence. And what independence means is a pure acceptance of themselves as all of what they are. And when someone is independent, they become strong because they can accept everyone else as they are, and they don't fight against them because they're right or wrong. They look for and seek a greater level of understanding and purification of themselves through discovering collective truths. Now, for us to liberate ourselves, the first part where we can have, and look, and anyone can do this, from going into a plant medicine journey to having a deep soulful meditation, we can all get to a place. We can all recognize that space where we are the butterfly, we are the bird, we are the grass, we are everything, and we feel and can have that thriving through us. But there is nothing to that if we can't maintain it, if we don't understand that. And this is where generational wisdom has been lost, is in the passing of what particular step on these steps of life is my child being entered into this world on. Do they have to go back down to the steps that I went through in my own life because I don't understand how I got there? So if I don't understand the principles and the significance and the experience and relationship I have with myself and what creates that, if I don't understand that, well, I'm definitely not going to pass it on to my children. And at times, all I'll end up doing is, when I feel that they're doing wrong, I'll catch them doing wrong and say, oh, no, don't do it that way. No, you got to do it this way. There's manners, there's etiquette, there's morals. These are the things, but they're mostly based upon what they're doing wrong. And ultimately, what we set up is we capture people doing something wrong. There's an element of pain there, and then people become conditioned to receive love and attention through pain at a very early age. But if we shift this into this idea of generational wisdom, and this is why it's something to me that's so important and integral in what we bring forward, is generational wisdom requires a great level of responsibility of everyone involved. And responsibility is not that idea of blame. Responsibility is the liberation that I can change things for the better. You only take responsibility for things of significance or moments or opportunities in time because you believe you can make it better. You believe in some part that you might, for some of us at a lower point, is we think we're going to fix it. But responsibility is my ability, me responding to my ability and understanding, therefore, my ability. And if I understand my ability and the response that I can now make to that in the significance of it, I can then start to create something significant. So if I can take responsibility in my life and I can understand how it is that and what created me and these current experiences, I then have the capacity then to teach it to someone, and being the person that I most likely would love most in my life is the person that I have given birth to or been a part of co-birthing, let's say. And when I share that with them, and when I actually see and look into them and realize that they are me and everything that I'm providing for them, I have to deliver in a way that they can understand. It means I get a deeper understanding of myself. And as I get a deeper understanding of myself and liberate me, I start to see that played out in my child. And suddenly they're not starting at step 1. They're entering life at step 30 or 40. And ultimately, the pain that they experience is not pain. It's a preparedness to realize that moving into life, things are going to be, there's going to be adversity. There's going to be chaos. As I choose to actually become more and expose myself more and become more expansive in my life, there's going to be things that are going to oppose that are going to challenge that. And those things are the things that build resilience in my life. And if I embrace them, and if I learn to embrace those particular moments, then I move through them and with them. It doesn't mean they're easier. It just means that I don't put up any level of energy in my own life and dedicate it to fighting against what is presenting to me perfectly. Now, if I have this process of generational wisdom and I share that with my son or my daughter, and they then start to understand it, what I start to do is learn significantly in the different expression that they bring and how that then enriches my life. And this becomes a perpetual state of inevitable growth and expansion. And it's not by mistake that whether you want to think that there's someone there rubbing their fingers or, biting onto their little finger and considering how the downfall of your life, there's no such thing. What people are doing is maintaining their own space. And when we continue to consent to that, well, we maintain their wishes because of a greater level of organization and understanding and space and energy that they provide to creating what they want. So unless we're prepared to do that, unless we have structures in place that elevate an environment and a consistency by default of growth, we will find ourselves in fear. And fear will be the thinking of what I don't know, and therefore to stay exactly where I am, to not act. And so generational wisdom through schooling was stopped in that particular moment. And it's a brilliant idea for someone who wants to control a lot of people. Because what they understood is that generational wisdom and a connection that's created between a mother and a child, or a father and a child, is a bond that won't break. But it becomes so, let's say, destructive in these days because it is so unfulfilled. And the children and the parents are not enriching themselves in that most significant relationship. And therefore, we then, because that's not fulfilled, we start looking to the world for answers. We start wanting to change the government. We start wanting to change people around us. We start wanting to create movements that are all temporary rather than things that will sustain my life. But I just wanted to add one part. If I was to identify the principles in my life that I wanted to share with someone else, I have to go through a deep level of liberation to understand what it is that's brilliant in my life, that what is significant. That's a hard thing to confront. I know when we work with fathers and mothers and say, okay, you want to do generational wisdom, great. What is the brilliance in your life that is so significant that you want to share? And then it's at that moment they come to realize, you know what? I'm doing something I hate. I don't enjoy what I'm doing. Look at the example I'm providing. I'm living a life where I'm accepting mediocrity. I'm wanting my child to put themselves first, to elevate themselves, to believe in themselves. But here I am doing everything for everyone else, but nothing for myself. So the confrontation that comes is only one of brilliance because, yes, it is challenging, but it's only towards the greater acceptance of your own brilliance, which meets you in the rarity of your own life.
That's huge, brother. Yeah, I appreciate that share. And there's so much in that, particularly coming around full circle in the process of liberation and looking at all elements of life. And I've actually been enjoying this new series that's come out where it looks at integrating the older generation in a home and bringing in younglings like 4 and 5 year olds into the environment. Just seeing the energy between the two groups, but they're on such a radical scale of age and energy levels, but how people who are got so much wisdom, as you said, so much brilliance and intelligence and life experience to pass on to these children, but because they're so isolated and alone, they're quite depressed, anxious, and sad. They're not happy. They're really unfulfilled, and they're going out in their later years of their life. And these young kids just bring this beautiful energy to their lives, and to see that connection between that polarity of experience for the human dynamic is just beautiful to witness. The relevance of that interdimensional and intergenerational kind of communication and contact, as you spoke to, and the importance of having young children, because they also get a benefit out of it as well. Development in their communication and their language, and such a progressive development in their social skills as well, particularly learning from the older generations and their peers. It's just absolutely beautiful and interesting to notice how separated and segregated our societal constructs have come, these issues, and we're coming to an awareness and a period and an age where we're recognizing that we need to bring it back in together, as you said, into integration and interconnection. And it's beautiful that you really bring that up and focus on that area, that and the importance and significance of being the example, living, breathing now for the next generation as well. It's one thing to tell them and share with them what they can do and how they can be, but it's another to embody it and exemplify it. And that's probably the best that they can learn from as well, because it just becomes a ingrained pattern and a habitual kind of cycle that they can recognize and learn from the visual experience, but then they just also play out that behavioral pattern too. So beautiful, Jace. Thanks for sharing.
It's exactly what you're saying, Shay, is that to have enriching experiences with, you know, the older generation in the way that could occur is so much more deepened when that experience and the relevance of that is delivered first by their parents. And look, I would say, you know, these conditions of mental health that people have bought into as an offer of consent to say that, but one of the biggest things, I mean, and it's a passionate part for me, is that anxiety, depression, and that they are the most simple thing to overcome. But we have created them into such a monster because of lack of fulfillment in our life. And we start to believe in these types of things. But if we had generational wisdom, and it's something that, you know, is a real passion of mine, and is the most exciting thing that I feel I teach for me, and I love because of what I see from it. Because I see it so essential in the changing of where we're all moving towards, if we want to. And it's something that used to exist. It's just been exited for some reason. But when that's done by the parent to the child, then suddenly children start to explore people around them and have respect for the older generation, respect for other people, because they see them as opportunities to engage, and they feel confident engaging because they've got something to share. And suddenly there's joy. There's not a seriousness, and let's sit down, we have to have a chat about this, because these individuals and children start to manage themselves. Be themselves, be authentic.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing, Jason. And just to wrap it up, I just wanted to thank you guys who are listening and tuning in right now for this live video. Jason Reynolds from the Quantum Movement. Really just want to thank you for liking this video, sharing it with some of your friends. Leave us a comment, something that stood out for you in reflection, you know, something that maybe resonated and sitting on your heart that you feel has brightened up your day, maybe made a shift or a change in your perspective on your life. Just drop us a little comment there. We do follow up with the comments, and we're doing these live videos every fortnight. So we're going to tune back in a couple of Thursdays' time and open up the conversation. If there's something relevant that you feel you really want to explore on a deeper level, we can have a look at that as well for the next video. But Jason, I want to thank you for your time to unpack the deeper psychological and spiritual notions of our human existence. But of course, starting, you know, with the entrepreneurial process of being liberated, as well as, you know, the personal, physical, and emotional areas. And so it's very nice to connect, essentially. But reconnecting back to our essence and our nature and our brilliance that we are. I love your perspective on life and the way that you share it. So appreciate you, mate. Thanks for sharing.
Thanks so much, Shay. Really wouldn't be possible if you didn't start this, mate. So it's all kudos to you, and thank you very much for inviting us in. Yeah, I love these conversations. If I can, there's something that if people do resonate with this, there's something that we do as I suppose a communal thing is we're only just starting it, is we've got a 3-day free event for people to come in and just understand more of this type of space, to actually, you know, work from a life where everything exists to support you, and to realize that the destination in your life is actually the journey. And, you know, this is something that we're sharing. It's not something that goes beyond that, or people are expected to go beyond that. It is just something and exposing what may be possible, and it's something that we do as free to a community and anyone who wants to be a part of it.
That's huge, Jason. And just let everyone know, what's the best way that they can connect to this opportunity?
Is either through the Quantum Movement Facebook page. It's on there. It's they can join a community that we have, which is again a free space where we share and speak a lot into that space called A Quantum Journey. But there's also, it's starting next, I think it's next Tuesday to next Thursday, an hour a day, that we're going to be going through some of these deeper concepts and things that people can actually apply in their life. And we'll share a lot of stuff that we only share in paid environments. So it's something that I suppose giving back and giving into seeing more of what we want to create.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's beautiful, Jason. So guys, go and check it out. It's A Quantum Journey. It's a Facebook group, and then there's a Quantum Movement group as well, the page. So go and drop in, connect to it. It's a beautiful community, people sharing where they're at in their life, some courses and opportunities to drop in and connect with a like-minded community. So thanks for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you all very shortly.
Thank you, Shay.